Hi, this is Roger, thanks for dropping by, and this is the 2021 Project Orchids Part 4 Other selection process. And as I mentioned, or have mentioned, we're doing this one differently, Part 4. I'm going to give you quite a large list of plants that could be in this particular section to carry on through the year and do regular updates on. Far too many to actually be in the set, and the idea this time is you can choose 2 that you would like to stay in part 4. Yeah? So rather than trying to choose 1 to discard like we did before, this time you're going to choose 2 that you would like to stay. So it makes life a little easier, and I'm being generous and saying that you can choose 2. The management of it and counting them up is my problem, not yours. Right, I'm going to rattle through these relatively quickly because there is quite a lot. And we're starting off with this little one. I'm taking advantage of the fact there is a decent bit of light in here today. This is a little Bulbophyllum Pumilio, little species, has beautiful little flowers on it, and is currently in its active growth phase where it's got many new growths. Here, new one starting here, round here. This one's maturing now, it's got its bulb. Okay, so quite a lot of new growth on there, and will come into bloom on previous growths. That's where this one blooms from. So if it's got that number of new growths, in theory there should be that number of blooms. I doubt if they'll all come out together, but who can tell. So little Bulbophyllum on a mount, plant number 1. Right, plant number 2, Epidendrum lennipes, probably how you say it. Grew quite well last year, produced 1 nice mature cane and another undersized one, and one that also was undersized. So I'm expecting this to grow better this year, and hopefully the new growths are going to be more like this, up to a decent size. Produced some reasonable roots last year. It's yet to bloom, so I don't know what the blooms are going to be like. I don't know where the spikes will come from or anything about it. It's a novelty, and I've deliberately not looked this one up. I want it to be a surprise if and when it blooms, both in where from, how many, and all that sort of stuff. So that's why that one's in here. It's because it's an unknown quantity, so we could follow that through. I would doubt if it would get to this time next year without blooming. I'm pretty sure we are going to get some blooms at some point. So that's plant number 2. I'm including my Coelogyne cristata on the grounds that its growth pattern has been erratic in the past, although last year it produced good growths, and each of which has I won't say dormant, but it has a strange habit, this one, of producing its flower spike quite early, but then it stops and they don't move for some considerable time, and then they start to move and bloom, and that's just the way this one is. There are quite a few of those types of flower spikes on here lurking, so we will get a reasonable blooming on that this year, and then I'll be interested to see where it shoots out from and where the new growths come from. Many of them may well be up in the air like this one. We shall wait and see, but yeah, I'm including that. It's a large plant, and it's recently decided to start growing pretty well for me, whereas in the past it either stalled or grew weak or didn't bloom, whereas now it seems to be getting going a bit better. But that doesn't mean to say it'll keep going like that. It could go downhill again, who knows. So that's Coelogyne cristata. It's actually the variety lemoniana, which that variety name comes from the person who described it and named it and all that sort of stuff. It's a Mr. Lemon, rather than anything to do with the colour. So that's that one. And if you don't like the great big Coelogyne, there's another choice, my other one, which is Coelogyne nitida. Used to be Orchracia, I think it used to be called. Now this one got repotted a little late. It was in its pot a little bit too long, so its root system was starting to go. I assume it will recover okay. We've got something growing there, and something growing out of the middle of the plant. Those could be new growths. They could be spikes. I can't remember for the life of me where the spikes come from on this. I've got a feeling what actually happens on this one is rather unusual, which might be interesting to watch, is that it starts what looks like a new growth. That grows and blooms, and then when it's finished blooming, it carries on and produces the leaves and produces a pseudobulb. So it's like a combined effort. I think that was this one. I think that's what it does. Anyway, so that's that one. You can choose the smaller Coelogyne if you choose to. And as I say, I'm pretty sure that one's got that strange growth pattern. Right, I'm including Dracula Bella simply because we used to have the cooler, shadier section, and that section has now been replaced by other, but I didn't want to exclude the orchids that would be in that section, so I'm going to use this one to represent that sort of section, or one of them. And the reason I've chosen this is it's troublesome. Last year this produced about a dozen bloom spikes out of the base of the pot, and not one of them actually flowered. They all aborted, every single one. Now the plant itself isn't too bad. It's certainly a mature plant, and we have had the odd bloom on this, but last year, I mean, obviously we had a heat wave, that didn't do them much good, but basically I've changed the media. I think the moss it was in was too compacted and had turned acidic, and it was therefore the roots just weren't growing. So it's been repotted in the cocoa husk, which is relatively loose. It's got some air around it, but it stays moist like the moss did, but doesn't go off anywhere near as quick. When we repotted it, it didn't have a very good root system, but at the top of the plant it had signs of new roots growing. So it'll be interesting to see what this one does this year. If it can produce a decent root system as a consequence of the change of media, I think it will have the strength to possibly produce some spikes that will bloom rather than abort. But it's a wait and see. It's just one of those that just needs a little something to get it to perform correctly. And I'm hoping that the repot and the change of media was that thing. So we'll see how that one does. And the other one from the cooler, shadier section that would have been is Masdevallia ignea. Now this recently again has had a dramatic change in media. Having done some reading, this one more often than not grows on the ground. So I've changed the mix to be what I would call a semi-terrestrial mix. So there's still an amount of air in around the mix, but it's got some peat in it. So it's got some earthiness to it. Now, since it was repotted, it's dumped quite a few leaves. Nonetheless, the ones that are still there don't look too bad. But what it is doing is starting to grow. So around the base of the plant, we do have growth. And as you know, with Masdevallias, with new growths at some point down the line, we will get new roots from those basal areas, which should then get into the new media. They will therefore acclimatise immediately, and we should get a reasonably healthy plant down the line, except for the fact it's too warm in here during the summer. So I'm hoping this has got enough time to get going and establish at least a partial root system before it gets too warm for it. Because with the heat and a poor root system, it just won't hydrate very well. And this is not really a cooler grower, it's a cold grower under normal circumstances. So this one's, yet again, it's an experimental mix that it's in, never been tried before, and we'll see how it progresses if it's chosen. So Masdevallia ignea. Right, and the next one is the little Psychopsis. The mounted one was in last year's set, so I've chosen a potted one this time. This one is struggling, but then again it is winter time and it's too cold. It would prefer to be warmer, so I wouldn't expect it to perform dramatically this time of year. It was bought with a spike, which I've got a feeling is aborting, but it depends whether there's life pushing up there, what will happen to the spike. Because it hasn't bloomed, I'm not sure what it would think about trying to produce a new bud on top of the one that is obviously not going to open, or whether it's going to start growing, or whether it's going to branch, or whether it will just abort completely. Very, very poor root system, virtually non-existent, and it's grown nothing since I got it. So it's done nothing until now. And what we have now is something coming up there. Now that is a very strange place for a new growth on top of a leaf, so it's more likely to be another spike, which I'd be very surprised at, to push another spike out from the same place. But there again, it is called Mariposa twins. Maybe that's why it's called twins, because it produces two spikes. I am joking. That could be true, I suppose. Anyway, so we've got a virtually rootless Psychopsis. It was potted up in the coconut husk so that it retains moisture around the base permanently, doesn't dry out, and yet still has air around it. That's the purpose of this. This could have gone in loosely packed moss, but the moss would go off because it needs to stay moist all the time. Shouldn't dry out really. The moss wouldn't last too long, and I'm just hoping that changing to the cocoa husk I can keep this moist without the media going off, because most people say they're not happy about getting their roots disturbed. With this one, it wasn't a matter of disturbing the roots, because it didn't really have much of a root system, so it didn't get disturbed that much, did it? Anyway, we'll see how that one produces if it's selected. Next one is this little Aerangis. It's a relatively new plant. I certainly haven't had it long. It came mounted, so I've done nothing to this one. And at the moment, I don't intend doing anything. I'm confident that that is multiple plants, and I suspect somebody grabbed a pinch of seedlings and put them on a mount, and they've grown on from there. That is probably what's happened here. Now this is a new one on me. I hadn't heard of it before, but I had seen pictures and wondered what it was. Most Aerangis are either white or creamy white or greenish white or pale yellowish white or even brownish white. Dominant colour being white. They're night scented, pollinated by moths. They don't need colour. However, this one is white with a bright orange centre. And it's one of the only Aerangis I can think of that's actually got bright colour on it. And that's why I decided to get it. You know, it's something different. But all the plants have got new leaves growing, so it's growing, it's okay, you know, it's comfortable. Obviously not bloomed. The plants may still be a year or two off blooming, I don't know. I don't know how big they need to get, but it's growing okay, that's the important thing. And that's Aerangis luteo-alba variety rhodosticta. So you can look it up if you want to see what the blooms are like. But yeah, it's one I hadn't heard of by name, but had seen the blooms. And once I put the two together and found one for sale quite easily, I thought we'll have some of that. So that's that one. Now we can play games with this one. This is a Sarcochilus, but I don't know which one. I was given two complex hybrids that originated in Australia or New Zealand? Australia. And they were both tagged and both named, and they were actually in bloom. But having repotted them, the tags have gone, so I don't know which one we've got here. So I've just picked one at random so that we can follow it through. These don't grow that well for me. At the moment, this one does have what looks like a spike starting, which means if that doesn't abort and it actually progresses, we'll not only have some Sarcochilus blooms, but we'll be able to find out which one's which, because obviously I did take pictures of the blooms. But they haven't got registered names. Both of them are just a cross. So this could be amber yellow glow cross with I can't say that word. I think it's the name of the nursery. It's Culnura or something like that, Kaleidoscope Full Arch. So it could be that one, but it could be the other one. And I'm not going to attempt to put a name on it. We're just going to call it Sarco. come on, brain. Sarcochilus hybrid. And that's what it'll be called until such time as it produces a bloom and can be positively identified. Yay, my bread's done. Lovely smell of fresh bread again. So that'll beep for quite a while because it's actually finished now. It's expecting me to go and take it out and everything. Yeah, so that's I thought we'd include a vandaceous type. So that's a Sarcochilus. We haven't had one of those in the project plants before, and we'll see how it gets on. As far as a root system is concerned, it's got one, but it's not brilliant, and it does have one new root with a growing tip sticking out the top of the pot. So it's not a brilliant root system, but it's got one. And, you know, these grow lots of plantlets from the base of the plant and can form quite a nice clump. Well, they do when they're grown well anyway. So that's that one. And I thought I wanted to include one of the Renantheras, and most people seem to be of the impression that we go for the plants that aren't doing very well. Well, in this case, you're right. The other two Renantheras are doing fine, thank you very much. But this one rotted. The whole base of the plant just rotted and had to be cut off. And I managed to cut it off in such a way that one root was still on the base, and that's this one. And it has grown from there to there. So this root is growing actively. But I can't see any signs of any other new roots from the base at the moment. Now, these are relatively warm growers, so obviously in the winter it's going to be going at its slowest pace. But it's survived, it has a root, it's in damp moss to try and encourage some more roots, which may or may not happen. But I suspect if it's going to produce some more new roots, or this one's going to branch, it's going to happen when the warmer weather comes. Yeah, so that's a possibility. We ought to keep our eye on the leaf structure as well. So, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 mature leaves, 2 immature leaves, and 1 new leaf. Whether that new leaf is actively growing or stalled, I don't know, but we can benchmark it from this particular point in time. I am collecting stills of all the plants that are selected so that we can have a look at them when we get the videos going proper. So Renanthera imschootiana, and that's shoot not spelt the normal way. Spelt S-C-H rather than the other method, the other type. So yeah, relatively new plant, new genus for last year. Bought 4, 1 died, 1 struggled, 2 doing well. So, you know, can't have everything your own way, but I thought we'd have the possibility of including a Renanthera. Right, this one was actually requested, and it's probably one that if not selected I'll override and include anyway, but the more votes it gets, the less overriding I've got to do. This was given to me, it was in a parcel from Speciotic Plants from eBay, and it was called the Challenge plant. So it was gifted to me as a challenge in bloom. So I think the challenge is to get it to do it again, possibly, or keep it alive, or both. So it is a strange one. I put it in a similar category to the way Zygos would grow. It's along those lines, although not identical. So what we've got then is we have a new growth here, yeah, so we've got that. And then round here we have another new growth that looks weak. I'm not sure that's going to make it. And the tiniest one there coming off a side shoot. So I don't know what that's going to do. But what we do have is some root growth. Now this was repotted into the coconut husk as was the Zygo, as it's along those lines. Needs to stay moist but not soggy, all that sort of stuff. And I haven't got a clue what it's going to do next, but it's a genus I'd never heard of, Pabstia, you know, and the species is jugosa, or jugosa if you're Spanish, jugosa, sorry, but Either way, however it's pronounced, it's an unusual plant. The blooms were beautiful and they lasted well. I would love to see them again. But it was classed as a challenge plant for some reason or another. So we'll class it as a challenge plant and see what we can do with it throughout the season. And last but not least is my Zygopetalum hybrid. I think I'd get lynched if I didn't include this one. Several people requested it, and quite honestly I was going to include it anyway, even if it wasn't requested, just because it's gone from a category of probably going to die to one that's actually doing reasonably well for a change. Now the state of play with this one, every time I film it, there's an element of this plant gets forgotten, and it's this bit here. We always look at this strong new growth here, but there's an almost equally strong new growth directly behind it, which is sort of coming out from between the bulbs. So it's actually in the middle of the plant. So it's hardly possible to see what's going on underneath it as far as roots are concerned, but it is there nonetheless. And then our main new growth out the front here, which I recently established has a shoot, and Michael McCarthy said, keep your eye out, you may get another one. I hate it when people are right all the time. Well, they could both be spikes. It's highly likely, because they seem far too high up for growths. Root activity underway, so that growth has roots. We've got this tiny little shoot at the side, which I believe has stalled, so that may never grow. It may just sit there as is, and not do anything. But we do have new root activity. Down in the pot, the old roots after repotting were maintained. They didn't die, and some of those are actively growing. There are green tips pushing out. So I think we have a relatively healthy plant, or certainly for me, to have a zygo that's alive is a bonus. So progress on this one. It looks like we may have 2 spikes on that latest growth and new roots, both of which tend to go together. And seasonally, if you think about where we are in growth terminology, by the time we get towards the end of the season, we should be into new growths again, having gone full cycle. If this grows in an annual cycle. That frightened the life out of me. The pot moved. I thought it was going to fall over. It was just settling itself in the clay pot, I think. Yeah, so, you know, it's in cocoa husk as recommended. It has roots growing in the pot, out in the new growth. I'm happy that it's underway and it's alive and the leaves are green. It looks healthy. And that's the first time I can say that in this grow room, I think. Having followed a repot, I've got a zygo that looks healthy, because under normal circumstances they die. They go downhill to such an extent, to me they just seem beyond rescue, so they've been dumped. However, this one gets to stay. And that's the lot. So, as I said at the beginning, choose 2 in the comments under this video, please. And can you try and get it done, you know, within the next couple of days, quite honestly, because I get selections to drop from the previous 3 parts long after the decision's been made. So, you know, those people's views have been ignored because the decision was already made. So don't leave it too long. We're coming up to the weekend now, so we're on a weekday. So if you view videos on a weekday, you'll catch it. If you can only watch some videos at the weekend, hopefully you'll catch it soon. And we'll go from there. So all the plants have been, you know, they've all got their number and their names next to them. And if you want to join in and help with the selection and be part of all this, then please leave a comment with the 2 plants you would like to see kept in this particular selection. And we'll go from there. It's all good fun, isn't it? Now I've got to get some fans on because it's 24.5 degrees in here and I am absolutely roasting because all the kit's off. So I need to get some air movement going around here. It's getting hot and stuffy in here, so we'll get some air moving and see where we go. See you next time, and thanks for joining in. Thanks for your help, because that's what it is really.